Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Ideas for Innovation webinar series and our latest edition in support of our latest brief, Prosperidad Economica, Education and Workforce Outcomes for Detroit's Latino and Hispanic Community. Thank you again so very much for taking time out of your afternoon to be able to join us today for this power-packed hour where you will hear from our experts and authors of the brief, Benita Wah, as well as Juan Sandoval, and then you will hear from a power-packed panel moderated by Robert DeWalsh from El Centro Hispanic News, and then you will hear from sector experts that we are so fortunate to be able to have this afternoon with us. Consuela Barber-Lopez with Ritmo, Lex Zaval with Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Stephanie Lopez-Gilmore with Mana de Metro Detroit, and Veronica Sanchez Peavey with Sir Metro Detroit. We are so excited to be able to have them be able to speak with you today. And also, we're excited to hear from you on this really important topic to the residents of the city of Detroit. While you are here, we'd like to know who all is in the room. So if you have a moment, please participate in the poll now and let us know who you are and where you're from, also in the chat, as well as share the information that you are learning in this webinar today with others in your community. You can please tag us on Facebook using Detroit Future City, at X, formerly Twitter, at DET Future City, or if you are on Instagram at Detroit Future City. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our President and CEO, Anika Goss.
There we go. We're having a lot of tech issues today. Hola, buenos tardes. Thank you so much for coming today. We are so excited about today's webinar. We are hugely excited about the data that we're going to share with you today. Detroit Future City's mission is to create a more sustainable and economically equitable future for Detroit. We recognize that addressing equity gaps among Latino and Hispanic Detroiters is critical to ensuring they can compete and participate in the rapidly evolving job market, ensuring access to growth occupations and middle wage job opportunities, while also benefiting the Detroit region with a more skilled and diverse workforce. We developed the brief, Prosperidad Economica, Education and Workforce Outcomes for Detroit's Latino Hispanic Community, to shed light on the disparities across critical equity issues related to education and workforce in the Latino Hispanic community. This brief builds an extensive research that DFC has been able to collect, and that builds on the state of economic equity in Detroit. This was a report that was released in 2021 that we continue to update through our dashboard on our website. The Latino Hispanic community makes up about 7.5% of Detroit's population and has deep roots in our city as residents, as well as newcomers to the city as a whole. And they have the power to transform our neighborhoods and our region's economy, but only if collaborative action is taken to address the systemic barriers to closing the wealth and income gaps of the Latino Hispanic community. Throughout the webinar, you're going to hear from Detroit's research team, highlighting key data findings from the brief, followed by a really great panel that's comprised of some of the leading Latino and Hispanic voices in education, workforce development, and youth development sectors in the city. We hope that you leave today's session inspired to continue the conversation and ready to join other stakeholders in the fight for innovative solutions that will bring the changes needed to achieve transformative, equitable outcomes for the Latino Hispanic members of our community. Gracias. Please enjoy this afternoon and the webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Vinita Vag, and I'm also joined by Juan Sandoval, and we're co-authors of this brief. And we'd like to take you through some of the data findings and the insights that we received on this brief. And I'd like to start us off with a little bit on why we're focusing on education and workforce outcomes for the Latino Hispanic community. Research has shown that, among other things, the level of educational achievement significantly influences the ability of individuals to participate and excel in the workforce. Employment outcomes have an important bearing on long-term economic prosperity. And as Anika mentioned, by addressing equity gaps in education and employment, the region can benefit from a more skilled and diverse workforce as well. But before we get into the data findings, I do want to note that we recognize that the Latino Hispanic community in Detroit represents diverse nationalities, ethnic heritages, and cultural identities. And so throughout the brief and the presentation, acknowledging these nuances, we use the term Latino Hispanic to refer to all individuals of Latin American descent or Spanish origin. We also recognize that different subgroups within the community have diverse experiences and face unique challenges, and that inequities not only exist across different groups, but also within. That said, data limitations in some capacity prevent us from digging too deep into these nuances. Now, a little bit about the community in Detroit, just in numbers. In 2022, Detroit was home to over 48,000 Latino Hispanics, representing about 7.5% of the city's total population. And of these, 70% Latino Hispanics were US born. On the map, we see that the Latino Hispanic community is primarily concentrated in Southwest Detroit. So these are all the green dots that you see on the map. This next section looks at some indicators that reflect educational progress. One of the early benchmarks of a student's academic progress is their English language and arts proficiency at the end of the third grade. So between 2019 and 2022, third grade English language and arts proficiency declined by 9 percentage points for Latino Hispanic students. So that's from 19% to 10%. Now, this 10% is also 12 percentage points less than the proficiency of white students. And just for additional context, region-wide, the proficiency for Latino Hispanic students is 27% and statewide 29%. So reforms are essential in elevating the performance of the city's students, especially in regard to this metric. The next level of educational achievement is high school completion and then a bachelor's degree. We know that a high school diploma is a standard prerequisite for most jobs and for higher education opportunities. So ensuring that Latino Hispanic Detroiters are completing high school and are therefore eligible for advanced degrees requires action on many fronts. Now, data shows us that Latino Hispanic students drop out before completing high school at significantly higher rates than other major race groups in the city and compared to the citywide average. So that's 45% compared to the citywide average of 17%. And comparatively, the share of Latino Hispanics in the state who did not complete high school was 23%, nearly half that of those in the city. Moreover, if you look at the last band, 11% of Latino Hispanic Detroiters have a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to, again, 17% of that's the citywide average. But it is also in stark contrast to the 37%, that's the attainment rate of white Detroiters. And again, for reference, Michigan's Latino Hispanic community achieved a bachelor's degree or higher attainment rate of 23%, and the nation's Latino Hispanic community stands at 19% in this regard. Although educational attainment rates have sustained through the pandemic, there's been modest improvements for these two particular metrics. So that goes from 50% to 45% for those not completing high school, and 4% to 11% for bachelor's degree or higher, which are both good signs, but breaking down hurdles to boost this attainment rate for Latino Hispanic Detroiters is key. Now, a bachelor's degree isn't the only pathway into the middle class. Career and technical education programs provide an alternate route and offer academic, technical, and skills-based training. Data shows that Latino Hispanic students experienced a 10 percentage point decline in CTE completion rates between 2019 and 2023. And in contrast, Latino Hispanics in the state had a CTE completion rate of 42% in 2023. So there's a need to address student retention in such programs to encourage young Latino Hispanic talent into non-traditional career pathways. Further, we also convened a research advisory group that works with and reflects the community to understand the local context surrounding some of the numbers that we were seeing in the data. So conversations with this group highlighted that additional resources within the classroom are needed to support student success in schools, and a range of external factors also shapes and impacts student learning. So that could be access to technology, housing stability, neighborhood conditions, etc. And many from the community are also the first in their family to have completed high school or college, despite having deep roots in Detroit. Latino Hispanic students and their families face challenges in accessing basic wraparound services like transportation and physical and mental health care. Such students often shoulder familial or financial commitments early on that prevents them from participating in completing educational programs. Next up, I'm going to hand this over to Juan to walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Sandoval, and I will be providing an overview of the education workforce connection. Next slide, please. So why education, you ask? Well, a bachelor's degree has been shown through various amounts of literature that has the potential to increase an individual's earnings. However, it's also important to recognize that wages earned per hour are also an indicator of racial inequity in the education employment landscape. So Latino Hispanic Detroiters with a bachelor's degree earn $24 an hour, which is about $5 less than their white counterpart. From the chart, we can clearly see that a bachelor's degree does increase an individual's earnings, but supports are needed to reduce substantial wage gaps. Next slide, please. And an important marker of the strength of the economy is the unemployment rate. Between 2017 and 2022, the unemployment rate for the community decreased by 3 percentage points from 15% to 12%, which is a good sign. However, to improve and to maintain this trend, it is important and essential in order to strengthen and support the Latino community. However, to improve and maintain this trend, it is essential to strengthen supports for Latino Hispanic community. Next slide, please. And in 2022, despite having higher participation in full-time employment, sitting at around 84%, Latino Hispanic Detroiters had lower rates of year-round unemployment. Full-time work is working more than 30 hours per week, and year-round work is working more than 48 weeks a year. The distribution of full-time and year-round work is a measure of unmet potential in the labor market and possibly job quality for the Latino community. Next slide. And middle wage jobs are another important indicator of economic strength. DFC defines these jobs as accessible to workers without a bachelor's degree, and also pays workers more than the local labor market's median wage. DFC's report on middle wage jobs shows that 29% of Latino Hispanic Detroiters are engaged in accessible but low wage jobs. 35% are engaged in middle wage jobs, and 35% are in jobs that require a bachelor's degree. Next slide, please. Moreover, DFC's report on growth occupation shows that only 13% of Latino Hispanic Detroiters were employed in growth occupations, the top 5 sectors in the city being healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing, professional, scientific, and technical services, finance and insurance, and construction. And DFC defines growth occupations as jobs that are growing at the same or higher rate than the region as a whole and have increased wages between 2014 and 2019, pay at least a middle-class wage of $25 per hour or $52,000 per year in 2019, and employ at least 300 people in the Metro Detroit region. And also, if you're interested and you would like to know more, DFC's 2023 report growth occupations mentions the industries driving employment growth in Metro Detroit. Next slide, please. And some other conversations that we had with the Research Advisory Committee, or RAC, also highlighted these important insights, which include Latino Hispanic workers are typically underrepresented in high-wage sectors and overrepresented in low-wage industries compared to their non-Latino Hispanic counterparts. Among other external factors, limited educational attainment is a significant contributor to their concentration in low-skill and low-wage jobs. Despite being engaged in diverse occupations, they are also more likely to hold seasonal employment that sees an uptick during a few months in the year. And the types of jobs that workers engage in contribute to lower earnings, limited opportunities for advancement, and limited access to employer-provided benefits. Next slide, please. So now we'll move into discussing closing achievement and opportunity gaps. Next slide, please. To ensure Latino Hispanic Detroiters can compete and participate in the rapidly evolving job market and have access to jobs that pay a middle-class wage, there is a need for concerted efforts and investment in the following, which includes addressing existing disparities and investing in educational solutions, improving access to and outcomes of job training skills and workforce readiness programs, reducing unique barriers and opportunity and participation, and strengthening wraparound services. This also concludes the end of our presentation. I'd encourage you all to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll go ahead and hand over to Nicole, who will introduce our panel.
Thank you, Juan, so very much. We are so excited to be able to share this data, and we hope that this data, as well as the panel discussion, will really result in additional action. And we hope that this research can be a tool for all the organizations that are on the call today. And again, you can access this brief, as well as the other reports that were noted in the presentation, the State of Economic Equity, which was published in 2021, and our growth sectors occupation report, which was published in 2023, on our website at DetroitFutureCity.com. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the amazing panel that we have convened to be able to go a little bit deeper and to go beyond what the issue is, and to begin to talk about some of the innovative solutions that are taking place throughout the Metro Detroit area and throughout the state, and really leave us with some calls to action today. So I would love to be able to introduce our moderator for the afternoon, Mr. Robert DeWash, who is the managing editor with El Centro Media. Also joining us on this panel for this robust conversation today is Lex Zaval, who is the Chief Operating Officer with Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Veronica Sanchez Peavey, who is the Senior Assistant Vice President for Adult Services and Regional Director at Metro Detroit, and Consuela Barber-Lopez, who is a longtime community activist and director of Ritmo. And then last but not least, Stephanie Lopez-Gilmore, who is currently the president of MANA de Metro Detroit. And without further ado, Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate today's conversation regarding Detroit Future Cities brief on advancing education and workforce outcomes for Detroit's Latino Hispanic community. The purpose of today's webinar, as I understand it, is less about the particulars and methodology of the brief and more about driving a conversation regarding how best to inspire change on a systems level and foster improved outcomes going forward. First, I'd briefly like to share some information about El Central Hispanic News and how we've come to moderate this webinar on these critical issues. El Central is the oldest and largest bilingual weekly newspaper serving Hispanic communities in Michigan. Dolores Sanchez, who many of you know, founded the newspaper in 1988. And 2.5 years ago, my wife, Eva Garza DeWalsh, and myself purchased the paper in April of 2022. Dolores, I'm happy to say, still works with us as Director of Advertising and Sales, and Eva serves as the owner and publisher of the newspaper while concentrating most of her energies on leading Metro Detroit as its president and CEO. We launched a new website and social media platforms within 3 months of the change in ownership in July of 2022. And since then, we've worked to grow the circulation and impact of the media company by publishing more original stories for and about Latinos and other residents of Southwest Detroit and the metro area. El Central has a long history of supporting educational institutions that serve the residents of our community through such programs as Wayne State University's Center for Latino, Latina, and Latin American Studies, formerly known as Chicana Boricua, as well as workforce programs at Metro Detroit, Southwest Economic Solutions, and many others. We'll soon launch a regular column about educational issues contributed by new contributor, Oakland University's Assistant Dean of Students, Dr. Ora Casares. Lastly, we'd like to invite the participants of today's webinar to talk about submitting their opinions about challenges that we're going to be discussing today for publication in future issues of El Central. With that, let's get started with questions for our panel. So our first question is going to be answered by each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Veronica Sanchez Peavey from Metro. The question is, please tell us about the role of your organization in Detroit's education and workforce development sectors. Veronica?
Thank you, Robert. Great to be here. So first, SER's mission is advancing people, growing businesses, and strengthening communities through education, employment, and economic development. And we have been able to do that, fortunately, for over 50 years. Some of you may know we started as a small community-based organization in Southwest Detroit, but we have since evolved, and we service the entire city with 6 locations, and we serve over 15,000 people a year. Now, what we do is we offer a series of education, vocational training, job placement programs, along with year-round youth development and education initiatives. And we've been able to be fortunate and pivot based on the demand of the employers and our community on what we offer. So some of the things that we are able to offer right now is apprenticeship readiness programming and construction in the skilled trades. We have ESL and GED programming. We are a charter high school for the Detroit Public School Community District. And it includes a vocational track with construction and healthcare. We manage 2 Detroit at Work Career Centers, one with our Goodwill partner. And most recently, we have expanded our programming for returning citizens or justice-involved residents. On the flip side, we also offer employer services such as talent acquisition, career fairs, and employer or industry-focused events.
Thanks, Veronica. Stephanie Lopez-Gilmore, same question. Please describe what Mana de Metro Detroit does in this sector.
Yes, so MANA's mission is to empower Latinas through leadership development, community service, education, and advocacy. And so we have our Hermanitas program, which is our mentorship program, in which we go into our middle schools and our high schools, and we partner up with the local high schools and create our mentorship base. And so we have over 150 members. We try to pair the young Latinas with someone that's in the same field of choice. And then with that pipeline as well, we also give out scholarships. This past year, we gave out 15 scholarships in July, $2,000 scholarships for each of those young Latinas. And then those same Hermanitas also get the chance to go to our national organization, which will be celebrating its 50th anniversary this October in Washington and DC. So they get multiple opportunities when it comes to that for the educational aspect. We also have programs that go throughout the course of the year in which we do field trips. And then we also check in with our Hermanitas as well. And we have TIA programs for those that are in the college area. We also are implementing a new program starting in the fall for financial literacy, which we're opening it with not just our Hermanitas, but also for all of our members as well.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Consuela, tell us more about Mi Ritmo.
Hola, everyone. So Ritmo is a statewide organization that is connecting artists as Afro-Latino and Indigenous across the state. We had our first event and masterclass where we invited Raul Adania from Disney Pixar to do a masterclass. And so events like this in the future, starting this fall, we are getting people who are Latin that originated from Detroit, originated from Michigan, and we're connecting them with our youth and young adults who are in the arts and film and fine arts and performing in fine arts. Because the most important thing that I think we have the tendency to forget is the impact that the arts have on our cultural identity and the importance of that cultural identity in forming as adults in the workforce. And so when it comes to the arts industry or the entertainment industry, we make a large impact. And this is a part of our legacy in not just in Detroit, but all of the state of Michigan. And our impact globally. So Marionas, one of the first young men who came here as a refugee from El Salvador, now runs Adult Swim. And so he's actually going to be coming back to Detroit to do master classes with our youth. This will give our children another opportunity in the arts to flourish.
Great, thank you, Consuela. And Lex, same question. Talk about DHDC and what you're doing in this area.
Hello, everyone. So our largest program in this area will be our youth development program. We add arts to STEM, so we do STEAM with our youth. And we have our tech center where we teach different art forms, music production, video production, graphic design, video game production, and really gearing kids up for 21st century jobs, including like 3D design, 3D printing, those types of things, as well as our robotics program, where we host 10 high school robotics teams and 4 middle school teams, where kids are learning about engineering, machining, wiring, and they're paired with mentors from the professional industry, who are engineers, IT professionals, those types of things, really gearing our kids up for 21st century jobs. 90% of our kids who are in our program for 2 or more years go on to secondary education. And our programs go with youth up to 24, because many of our youth are first generation college students. So making sure that they have that support going into college so they don't drop out of college. And then we have our community violence intervention programming where we bring in sheltered workforce development. So the gentlemen or young ladies, they work with us at DHDC. We have a construction company and lawn service company that they work under. So that way they're getting their life skill lessons, their substance abuse, their anger management, while on the clock, and getting those job trainings, really meeting those barriers as well, to make sure that we're removing those for them. So if you have to go see your parole officer while you're on the clock, you still get paid for those hours, and you're not losing money because you have to go and see your parole officer during work time. And we have entrepreneurship classes, business courses, to really put our people, credit, building a business, filing an LLC. Those are things that we're not taught. They're not taught in school. So we're making sure that our people are taught what does it really mean to really be involved in the economic system that we have here in the United States, and how to be successful in that, how to purchase your own home, how to renovate your own home, and how to build your credit, and how to build generational wealth. And we start that from youth all the way up, and really making sure that our people are well versed in the hard skills and the soft skills needed to be successful.
Great, thank you, Lex. All right, so the next set of questions are going to be aimed at the individual panelists, but I would ask the other panelists if you have something that you'd like to contribute at the end of the first person's answer, then please indicate, raise your hand, throw up a fireworks or something, and we'll get you involved in the conversation. So the first question goes to Consuela. And let me just read it for you, Consuela. As a longtime community activist and now director of Ritmo, a statewide arts and entertainment organization focused on the Afro-Indigenous community in Michigan, what are you seeing as the biggest opportunities to close the economic equity gap through investment and policy changes in the education sector? That's a mouthful.
Oh, yeah, it is.
All right, have at it.
Well, I don't know if I said it, that civilizations are not remembered by their politicians, but by their artists. And the one thing that I know for certain is that when you know who you are, culturally speaking, that's an affirmation and a security that you take in your life journeys. And so one of the things that I've learned is that, especially being Afro-Latina, is that seeing myself in the world, I did not see myself in the leadership. I did not see myself in school. I didn't see myself taught. And being an educator and seeing other youth, I know that there's 5 kids, young men, all brothers from Costa Chica, Mexico, that's at Cesar Chavez right now, right? And so they feel left out. And so one of the things that brings us cultural affirmation is through the arts, through music. And it brings sanctuary. And so being a musician and being an artist myself, and now being able to work with other artists, not across the state, across the country, and building that bridge, that gap. So everyone is not going to go into construction. A lot of people are not going to go into science tech. But we have a lot of youth, as Lex already knows, we have a lot of youth that go into the arts, but having that sustainability, understanding how to navigate through the arts, and most importantly, being able to have relationships with people who are from Detroit, who still make Michigan their home, who have made it. I have one Cuban guy, 9 Grammys, and he's here, but we don't talk to them. We don't have a relationship. So how we really become what we don't see. So bridging the gap is bringing the people who look like me, who are Afro and who are Indigenous, and create a space for them to reflect in our students, in our youth, and even in our community, to be culturally affirmed through the arts and see yourself. That's a win-win situation that I see. I can name another young man that we talk about, we don't see, Michael Gutierrez, Liddy Gutierrez's son. He's in film. And he splits his time from Detroit and LA all the time. So creating these partnerships and these mentorships, and we will be getting our brick and mortar and working with other partners in Southwest Detroit who've been doing this for a long time. And so I'm also apologizing, like I'm fighting COVID and I'm trying my best to survive in this conversation and whatnot. So I don't know if I answered the question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you did. You're doing great considering you got special challenges yourself. Anybody care to add to that?
Lex.
Yeah, so for so many of our people, our history starts with Christopher Columbus, right? And there's so many thousands of years of our civilizations that are not talked about with our kids, of all the art, all the architecture, all the science, all the knowledge that was taken from us, and really being able to ground our people back into that knowledge that we didn't just start at Christopher Columbus, and this was not empty land here when people showed up, that there's thousands of years of history of art, of architecture, of all these beautiful things that was taken away from us, and really grounding our people to be proud of that. And we're not just about those locals on TV. We are full of rich history, and have come from some of the greatest civilizations that this country is, this world has ever seen. We have bigger cities than Paris when Christopher Columbus came here, that had way more architecture. And those things are not taught to us in our schools, are not taught to us, and they're pretty much hidden from us. So really grounding our people back into that, so that way they have that pride in them, and knowing that this is something that they could take on, their arts, their different things that our people have been doing for thousands of years, and put back into that pride into us, that is something that's lost. And it's something that, I've seen Consuela and seen many of our people here in this community do, but it needs to be something that is more embedded in education and everything that's missing. How can you have pride in who you are when all you know is Christopher Columbus came here and stopped us from being savages?
Very good points. Very good points. Let's move on to question number 3 for Veronica. Veronica, as we think about opportunities for improving employment outcomes, the workforce development ecosystem plays a really important role, but there are barriers that folks might face both in participating in a program or getting a job on the back end. Can you share more about the unique needs of the Latino Hispanic community and how our workforce development system can better serve these workers?
Yes, thanks for the question, Robert. So I do have a couple things to share, but first, I think the first thing we need to think about is how do we ensure our community knows about these opportunities? About how do they know how to connect to the larger workforce ecosystem? We have to be able to look at non-traditional and culturally sensitive outreach and marketing materials, not just social media, but some of the boots on the ground that maybe, some of the, agencies here on the call are experts at, ensuring that print and other collateral are language accessible. So it's not just a traditional way to ensure our community knows about what's available to them. We also want to be able to support our Spanish speaking or limited English residents. So not only the system having bilingual staff like we do here at SER, but also supporting non-traditional programs like a bilingual training. We don't see a lot of bilingual GED or vocational training programs. Making ESL a core activity of workforce development, which it's not always seen as a core. It's like a non-core or just an added-on activity. So some of those things that will help our limited English or Spanish-speaking individuals upskill so they can get into those training programs and employment opportunities. And then how do we help our lower skill or lower wage job, community upskill? So a lot of our community works and they need to work like others, and they don't have the flexibility or the ability to stop working to go to a training program. So we need to think of untraditional ways to help them access those trainings. So evening, weekend training programs, specific training in those winter months, we do see an uptick in people coming into our centers because of unemployment, because of the industry that they're in. Entrepreneurship programs, that's not always a focus in workforce development. And so it's a focus in our community because you go down Verner and you see the flourishing, small businesses. But when it comes to like traditional workforce development, it's not always seen as, it's not that it's not viable, but something that we should focus on. So definitely that's another area. And then how do we service them holistically? Everyone has usually traditional barriers of transportation and childcare, but our community comes in with additional barriers, mental health, and also connecting their whole family, not just a person comes into our centers their grandparents, their sister, their brother, they all need something. And so first we're trying to address barriers to help them become employed, but we're also trying to help the family because, you know, more people earning in a household is just going to benefit that household and the community.
Great, thank you. You touched on a lot of different barriers and how they can be addressed. Anybody care to add to that on the panel?
I think making sure when you're doing program design is think about these barriers while you're doing that design, right? And making sure that we're in one of the few cities where the city does not fund youth development, and a lot of us get very little help from our government. So what is our government doing to help us overcome these barriers, and how do we advocate to our politicians that we need this equitable help that most communities don't need? Is a huge barrier for us, especially for grassroots organizations trying to fill the gap where our schools are lacking or our city job employment trainings are lacking. There's very few resources for our community to get those equitable things.
Right.
I
Very good
also
point.
have to add too, and one thing that we don't talk about is racism and colorism in the workforce, and knowing how to navigate that and knowing how to advocate for ourselves, and also finding warriors that we can trust that will help us to navigate those things, because that impacts our graduation rates in high school and in college, and it also impacts retention in workforce development. It doesn't matter which area, if you're in science, if you're in education, racism and colorism exist. And so if we empower ourselves by knowing how and teaching each other how to navigate these systems, we can advance a whole lot more, a whole lot faster.
Right, very good point. Sounds like that could be a whole webinar in and of itself, for sure. I want to remind everybody who's on the webinar that we would like to see your questions inserted into the Q&A box, not the chat, but the Q&A, and we'll be addressing those questions after the panelists ask or respond to some of these formal questions. So we're going to keep moving here. The next question is for Stephanie Lopez-Gilmore. Stephanie, your work centers on working with young Latinas addressing educational attainment, personal growth, and financial literacy. Can you please share the importance of the intersectionality of this approach to addressing the issues raised in the brief?
Yeah, so some of the things that we have known is that when, especially for education, right, going into school, there's a lot, as we all discussed, there's a lot of barriers that ends up happening. And so we're looking at the person as a whole. We notice that there's other things that they're always worried about. They're worried about their family, taking care of their siblings, taking care of their loved ones. Recently, when we gave out some scholarships, some of the scholarship recipients weren't able to be there because they had to go back to Mexico to take care of some of their family members. And so we know that those are always, especially as young Latinas, there's always called upon them to be the person that has to step up and take care of their, like I said, siblings, their aging parents, their grandparents, whatever it may be. And so unfortunately, a lot of times they have to take a step back from their education and putting their family members first. Other things that we see quite often is that they don't have someone in their family that has gone to higher education, right? Or has even completed their college, high school education. So having someone that they can see that's just one step ahead, that might be just recently graduated from high school, or even someone that's in college, that gives them that motivation so that they don't feel so scared entering into even a local community college, or even going even as far as going to like Grand Valley State University. For a lot of people that live in Southwest Detroit, being that far away from their family can be very scary, right? They're used to being in a small radius of Southwest Detroit. They're not used to being anywhere outside of that area. So even going to like, for community college can be a jump, but even going any further than that can be a little bit more scary for them. So really giving them that access to someone and having them have that warm handoff, saying like, all right, let's introduce you to someone. I've even personally taken up some students to Michigan State University and given them the college tour so they feel comfortable to make that decision on whether they want to go that route. Connecting them with professionals who, if they were looking at, recently I had someone who was interested in either going to criminal justice or going into social work. And so I was able to connect them with two people in those fields. And then she was able to make that decision based on the conversations that she had with those professionals on which route she wanted to go with her college choices. And so those connections and being able to give them that exposure that they might not get because, again, they're not getting it in their own households and not getting into smaller communities. It's broadening those that exposure for them. Financial literacy is a huge thing for me. I've noticed, and even in my own household, it's not talked about. Like the conversations were not talked about in my household at all. My mom just turned 77 yesterday, and I'm having conversations with her, and I'm talking to her about like some financial stuff. She just recently bought a car, and just trying to educate her about like, hey, you don't have to finance a car. Like you have the funds to self-finance a car. Why would you go out and finance it through other means? And just trying to educate her on that. Those are the things, those are the conversations that we need to have early on, and being able to educate our young Latinas so that they feel empowered to make those decisions, right? As we start to invest in education on financial literacy, because we're not taught that in schools at all, right? Most of the time, we're not taught that in our own households. We're taught to put the money underneath the mattress, save, work our butts off, right? But then when it comes down to retirement, we don't really have enough money to actually retire. And then we're just continue to be these workaholics, and that's not really helping us in the long run. When I'm trying to teach our youth that if we start to put money away as soon as you start to get a job, just a small portion of your check, by the time you retire, you'll have so much money that you will be able to financially feel secure, right? And they're not just educating them, but also educating their parents, because again, their parents might not have that background of why it's important to invest their money. They're used to saving and putting it into a savings account or even putting it underneath their mattress, but taking it one step further and saying, having an investment account, putting it away, right? Investment account is going to have that compound interest. It's going to grow. Also understanding about debit, like debt, and how debt and that compound interest can cause some long-term issues as well. Those things are really important because it allows that person to have more opportunities, right? It allows them to be able to buy a house, buy a car, get out of bad relationships, if that's the case, right? We see so often that people are in domestic abusive relationships and they stay in it because the abuser is the one that's holding this the finances over their head. Other things is just getting out of bad situations at work. Like if they don't like their job, they feel like they're stuck there because this is where my income's coming from. This is where my benefits are coming from. If they have that power to have that money aside, they can be able to get up and leave. And that's what I really want our community, especially our young Latinas, and our Latinas in general, to understand that financial literacy is important.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. You raised a lot of very important issues there. Rather than go around the panel again, I think we should go to our last question. We want to save some time for Q&A from the webinar participants. So, Lex, you've already talked a lot about programs and design at DHDC to address some of these barriers. Can you share a little bit more about how DHDC's youth development investment and community violence interruption programs are changing outcomes for community residents?
Yes. So, again, youth who stay in our program for 2 years or more, 90% of those youth go on to secondary education or trade school. That's because they're given that support that they need to get through these things, and making sure that we're designing things to fight those barriers that they have. You know, a lot of our kids, like it's been said many times, have never been to college. They've never seen anybody in their family go to college, or into a trade school. So really preparing them and giving them the opportunities. When those opportunities are there and the support is there, we've had kids go on. I've got a kid who just got hired by Tesla for engineering, and so many other kids who've gone on, who are painting murals around the world in art and making music and traveling the country on the powwow tour and living off of their native culture, making music, because they were given these skills, the supports that are needed, that they're not being given in the education system or any place else. And we're just a nonprofit with limited resources. if we could get the rest of our government and people to put these support systems in place and really design education to look like what it needs to, so people have these life skills that are needed to take their arts, to take their whatever passion is to the next level and live off of that, then we can fill these gaps. And we're looking at the people who are at the lowest, right? People who aren't making it, they have the most barriers. So what are we doing equitably to really fill those gaps and making sure that they're getting the things that are needed, the life skills and the hard skills that are needed to be successful? Because once we can do that, then we can really see economic wealth in our community, right? That's multi-generational. Because that's something that we don't know about. We don't learn credit in school. We don't learn debt in school. We don't learn these things in school, and we don't learn them from our parents because this is something that we're not taught. You know, this needs to be something that's embedded at a young age. So that way, by the time they graduate, by the time they're ready for the workforce, they have these skills and they know how to prepare for life.
Great. Anybody want to add anything real quick? Because we are approaching the top of the hour. If not, I want to go to one of the audience questions submitted by Gloria Rivera, and then if we have any more time, we'll go around to the last question that we have prepared. But Gloria asks the panel, she realizes that resources are not, whoops, something just jumped. Resources are not abundant, so decisions and desires to help are not easily carried out. What does your organization do to assist undocumented Latinos? I see a lot of what I could call waste or poor distribution of the few resources needed by all Latinos in our city. Again, from Gloria Rivera, whom many of you know. Anybody want to take a stab at that on behalf of your own organization?
I'd like to get it started. Actually, I was typing in the chat about financial literacy and education. So for us, I mean, we are we're heavily federally funded, you know, as a workforce development organization, but we have been able to diversify funds where we have philanthropy supporting, and we have some programming that it doesn't matter if you are undocumented or not. So our Center for Working Families that offers the career coaching, the financial literacy, we have helped individuals there, our ESL programs funded through other corporate partners. But there is a challenge in workforce development in terms of connecting individuals who are undocumented with work. So there needs to be a lot more intentionality at the policy level with immigration, you know, reform laws or regulations, or some more support either from city or government to help us figure out how to help these individuals become able to work in the United States.
Thanks, Veronica. Other responses?
So for us, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was gonna say, I'll take a quick stab at it. So we understand that undocumented students cannot get financial aid. So we do provide scholarships for our undocumented students. That's one of the things that when we're looking, our scholarship committee does consider when we are reviewing that you know, we do consider that the undocumented students do not get that. So that's one of the things that we are always considering, that we offer scholarships to those that are undocumented.
Great. Lex?
I was gonna say, as far as it goes for like workforce development, those types of things, we help our undocumented participants get their ITIN, so that way they are their own business, they pay taxes, and they're able to work contractually, and really helping them develop that business or whatever it is that they're looking to do, and giving them entrepreneurship classes, giving them a way to economic freedom here in the United States, where they're still paying taxes, even though they're undocumented and they're earning a wage. A lot of our undocumented people own their own businesses, own their own companies. So how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that's legal? How do you do that in a way that is able where you can help your family? And then also helping them have that emergency plan, just in case you do get deported or whatever. What happens to your business? What happens to your home? Who has law of attorney over your kids?
Thank you. Consuela, anything to add?
What I wanted to add was opposite of the question that I think that is really important and we need to stress on when we talk about safety and mental health and mental wellness with our youth, especially these past couple of years since the pandemic, whenever it ended, I don't know when, but the impact of our mental health and depression in our youth and young adults is astronomical, and it makes them more susceptible to be groomed for trafficking, labor trafficking, human trafficking, and these are things that we're not talking about at all in our community. And that's something I think we need to start talking about, because if it continues this way, if our youth continues to feel like they have no place, no security, no sanctuary to go to, and they're preyed upon continuously, we won't have a community, we won't have a generation that's going to take care of Lex when he gets older. And so, but it is really important that we do make this a part of our regular conversation when it comes to safety and security in the digital world, because that's where we in.
Right. Well, I know we're out of time, and so I have one last question for Anika and Nicole and the team at Detroit Future City, which is, how can we continue this conversation and focus on some of the solutions to helping the outcomes in terms of education and workforce in the Hispanic Latino community improve over time. So in the meantime, I want to thank all our panelists. Especially Consuela for going the extra mile under difficult circumstances. Feel better soon. And with that, we turn it over to Nicole and Anika.
Peace.
Thank you so very much, everyone. So I'm going to, before we move on, I'm going to bring back up our President and CEO, Anika Goss, to be able to answer that question. And then we'll have a couple of announcements following that. Anika?
Oh, okay, thanks. Rob, I wasn't sure if you were being rhetorical or if you wanted an answer, but this was an amazing panel. And I just want to thank all of you for participating in this. This was so important. And I completely agree. We have to find ways where we can make sure that we are lifting up and including Latino and Hispanic voices in all, not only in all of our research, but in the participating in our panels and our art and all of the work that we're doing. So yeah, I would say look for more from us in this area. I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys for today. This was amazing. Nicole, did you want to wrap us up with a couple of announcements?
Yes, thank you so very much. So to that point, we are really excited to share with you all that we have a save the date coming. So please join us for our 5th annual Equity Forum taking place October 22nd through October 23rd. And we are bringing as our keynote this year the dynamic Jelani Cobb, who is a guest commentator frequently across all of the major news networks and is a dean of School of Journalism at Columbia University. So please save the date, and our topic will center around the future of work in the city of Detroit. So a lot of the thing will definitely be continuing the conversation of that we started here today and more. And we also want to know from you, how did we do? What did you want to see more of? What did you think of the panel? What did you think of the brief? So please take a moment and screenshot the QR code on your screen and give us your feedback. We want all the feedback. And again, thank you so much to our authors, Vanita and Juan, and to our panelists and moderator, Robert, Consuela, Lex, Stephanie, Veronica. We cannot thank you enough for such a rich and robust conversation. We appreciate you all. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you at our next Ideas for Innovation.